It was a typical Friday night, and I, Mark, was out delivering pizzas for Sal's Pizzeria. The clock had just struck midnight as I navigated the dark, winding streets of an unfamiliar neighborhood. My GPS had led me to a remote location, far from the usual suburban homes and well-lit streets I was accustomed to. The road I found myself on was narrow, flanked by dense woods on both sides. The overhanging branches cast eerie shadows, and the wind whispered through the trees like an eerie lullaby. The delivery address seemed out of place, a lone house nestled deep within the woods. As I approached, the feeling of unease grew with every turn of the wheel. Finally, I arrived at the destination, a decrepit, dilapidated house with broken windows and a sagging porch. The place looked like it belonged in a horror movie, not on my delivery route. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether I should even get out of the car, but the promise of a generous tip urged me to proceed. I grabbed the pizza box and climbed out of my car, feeling the cold air wrap around me, like a sinister embrace. The gravel crunched beneath my sneakers as I made my way to the front porch. The house was eerily silent, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I rang the doorbell, and a shiver ran down my spine as the sound echoed through the stillness of the night. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a tall figure standing in the dimly lit doorway. The stranger's face was obscured by shadows, and his voice was a low, raspy whisper as he beckoned me inside. The interior of the house was even more unsettling than the exterior. The wallpaper was peeling, and the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The stranger led me to a dimly lit room at the back of the house and gestured for me to set the pizza down on a rickety table. As I placed the pizza on the table, I couldn't help but notice the room's peculiar decor. A collection of ancient masks adorned the walls, their grotesque features leering at me from the shadows. The stranger seemed to notice my unease and offered payment in a trembling hand. I took the crumpled bills and made a hasty exit, eager to put the unsettling encounter behind me. But as I walked back to my car, a strange sound filled the air. A low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the darkness of the woods surrounding the house. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my keys and rushed to start the car. The engine roared to life and I sped away from the nightmarish house, my heart pounding in my chest. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something. A shadowy figure with glowing eyes standing on the porch, watching me with a malevolent gaze. I drove back to the pizzeria in a daze, my mind reeling from the encounter. I told my coworkers about the eerie house and the unsettling stranger, but none of them had ever heard of the place. It was as if the house had materialized out of thin air, a nightmare I couldn't escape. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled into something far beyond my understanding. The growls and whispers haunted my dreams, and the image of the shadowy figure on the porch lingered in my mind. I vowed never to return to that remote, nightmarish house. But its presence continued to haunt me, a chilling reminder that sometimes in the dead of night, the ordinary can give way to the extraordinary, and the line between reality and nightmare can blur in the most terrifying of ways. The night was dark and foreboding as I, Jake, set out on my usual pizza delivery route. The clock had just struck midnight, and the streets were empty, shrouded in an eerie silence. The only sound was the hum of my car's engine as I navigated the desolate roads. As I approached an unfamiliar stretch of Huidar, a sense of unease settled over me. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, flanked by thick woods that swallowed the feeble glow of my headlights. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches casting long, menacing shadows across the asphalt. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness ahead, a lone hitchhiker standing by the roadside. I hesitated for a moment, my instincts warning me to keep driving. But something about the person's appearance tugged at my empathy. They seemed lost, vulnerable, and desperate. I pulled over, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. The hitchhiker approached, their face hidden beneath a tattered hood. They didn't speak, but their presence carried a heavy weight, a sense of sorrow that seemed to seep from their very being. Without a word, I offered them a ride, and they silently climbed into the back seat. The air inside the car grew colder, and a palpable tension settled in. I stole a glance at the rear-view mirror, but the hitchhiker's face remained hidden in shadows. I tried to strike up a conversation, but my words hung in the air, met only by a stifling silence. The only sound was the low, mournful wail of the wind against the windows. The highway seemed to stretch on endlessly, a desolate ribbon of asphalt leading us further into the unknown. As minutes turned to hours, a gnawing sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. The hitchhiker's presence felt increasingly oppressive, their energy suffocating. I knew deep down that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the hitchhiker spoke, their voice a hollow whisper that sent shivers down my spine. They gave me an address, a desolate, abandoned house at the edge of the woods. It was a place that sent chills through my very soul, a house that had long been rumored to be haunted. A sense of foreboding, I pulled up to the address. The hitchhiker exited the car, their figure vanishing into the darkness like a wisp of smoke. I watched in silent horror, unable to move or speak. The air seemed to thicken, suffused with an otherworldly presence. As I drove away, the weight of what had transpired settled in. Memory of the hitchhiker's haunting presence lingered, etched into my mind like a scar. I tried to shake off the feeling of impending doom, but it clung to me like a specter in the days that followed. Couldn't shake the sense that I had encountered something beyond the realm of the living. The memory of that desolate highway and the enigmatic hitchhiker haunted my every waking moment. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes in the dead of night, the boundaries between the living and the supernatural can blur in the most terrifying of ways. I, Brian, had always considered myself a night owl, so working the graveyard shift as a pizza delivery driver suited me just fine. One particularly moonless night, I was making a delivery out on the California highway, where the dark stretch of roads seemed to go on forever. It was a rural area with few signs of life, and the nearest town was miles away. The delivery was for a small roadside motel I had never been to before, and the address felt like it was in the middle of nowhere. As I approached the motel, its neon sign flickered erratically, casting eerie, intermittent shadows across the deserted parking lot. I pulled up to the motel's tiny drive-through window, which struck me as odd for a place that didn't seem to have any other amenities. I knocked on the window and a disheveled man with wild, unkempt hair appeared behind the glass. His eyes darted nervously, and he seemed to be muttering to himself. I handed him the pizza and waited for payment, but instead of reaching for his wallet, he just stared at me, his gaze unsteady. It was then that I noticed something strange, a crimson stain on his shirt that looked like fresh blood. My heart raced as I began to feel uneasy about the whole situation. I asked if he needed anything else, but he simply shook his head and closed the window abruptly, leaving me standing there in the darkness. I climbed back into my car, my mind racing with unsettling thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong at that motel. As I pulled away, I glanced at my rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. The man from the drive-thru standing outside his room, his face twisted in the grotesque grin. My pulse quickened as I drove down the empty highway, away from the motel. But no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't escape the sensation of being followed. Glancing in my rearview mirror again, I saw the motel in the distance, its neon sign now flashing an ominous message. "You can't escape." Fear surged through me as I realized that I was caught in a nightmare. The highway stretched on endlessly, with no signs of civilization in sight. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, emitting an eerie, static-filled whisper that sent shivers down my spine. It was the voice of the man from the motel, whispering my name in a chilling sing-song tone. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I drove faster and faster, desperate to escape the relentless pursuit. But no matter how far I drove, the motel seemed to reappear on the horizon, its neon sign flashing that ominous message over and over again. Hours passed, and I felt as though I had entered some sort of twilight zone, trapped in an endless loop of terror. The motel and its deranged inhabitant were now etched into my mind, a nightmarish vision that refused to fade. As dawn finally broke, I found myself back on the familiar California highway, the motel nowhere in sight. The radio played a cheerful morning jingle, and the darkness that had enveloped the night had lifted. I made my way back to the pizzeria, my heart still pounding with dread. I tried to recount the bizarre ordeal to my co-workers, but the words felt hollow, as if the nightmare had never truly ended. The motel and the strange man remained etched in my memory, a haunting reminder that some places on the midnight highway are best left unexplored, for they hold secrets that can drive a person to the brink of madness.